All right, everyone. Well, welcome back. And we are very luckily joined today by a fellow Aussie, Jake Matthews. So, Jake, look, thank you for joining the show today. Getting straight into it, the recent UFC Singapore card was really a standout night for Australian mixed martial artists, where we saw a plethora of Australian talent that is now in the UFC. Do you think the amount of Australian and New Zealander fighters that are now fighting under the UFC banner at a high level is going to bring more attention to the fact that Australia can produce some of the best fighters in the world?
Absolutely. Not only that can we produce some of the best fighters in the world, but we can do it out of Australia.
Yeah.
You know, long gone are the days where we have to, everyone, still to today, people ask me, why don't you go overseas to train? Why don't you go to America to train? It's where the best training is. And look, we've had Rob Whittaker who's champ. We've got Ali Volkanovski who is champ. We've got Israel Adesanya is a champ. Bam Bam's probably going to be the champ. Kai's probably going to end up being the champ. All from this side of the world. We all train on this side of the world. We didn't leave our homes to go train anywhere else. We did it in this region, and that's something that when I first started fighting the UFC, I wanted to be an Aussie fighter, born and bred.
Yeah.
And if that meant sacrificing a little bit in the early days, so be it. But I mean, we've done it. We've sort of myself, Dan Kelly, being pioneers. Staying in Australia, doing our camps in Australia, and we built up these good groups of fighters where our camps can rival those camps in the US.
Jake, obviously the big talking point, from your fight with Fialho was how differently you looked. You looked like the best version of Jake Matthews, we've ever seen before. Your boxing on that night, on that night may have been the best displays of boxing, pure boxing I've ever witnessed inside the octagon. So I saw a comment that you made in your post-fight interview saying that the biggest thing was I regress back to how I fought when I was a teenager. That boxing, that aggression is what got me into the UFC. Along the way, I lost that. Is there anything that you can recall as to why you think you might have lost that aggression along the way?
Yeah, the biggest thing is a lot of fighters do it. You fight a certain way that gets you to the UFC, and then now there's a lot more on the line. Bigger paychecks, probably your primary source of income, and just being in the UFC alone, it's very cutthroat. You lose a couple of fights and you're out. Once you're out, it's very hard to get back in. Probably 10 times harder to get back in than initially getting in. So all that pressure, I think, shuts fighters down, and then you start playing a safe game. Whereas what got you to the UFC, that's what you should be sticking with. That's what's going to, help you perform the best that you can inside the UFC. Lost that along the way, and also outside influences from, just from training camps and whatnot. I've had enough fights now where I know how I need to fight. I know how to get myself into the mindset. I know how I need to train. Obviously you always listen to your coaches and take into account what they're saying. But, at the end of the day, I'm well and truly a UFC veteran. So yeah, I know what makes me tick, what I need to do in training, where my strengths are. And I just said, enough's enough. I'm going to fight how I want to fight. And it all led back to how I used to fight pre-UFC.
Sure.
Probably a little bit more calculated now. I was very aggressive, a bit. So I have that aggression now, but also the intelligence, and it's a lot more calculated than it used to be.
Yep, for sure. So, look, Jake, you touched on it earlier, which is something about your career is that you have always been, as Australian born and bred, staying in Victoria, training at Resilience and XLR8. And you said that you've had a bunch of people tell you, go to America, go to Thailand. That's where the proper training is. As someone who has stayed in Victoria and trained throughout their entire career, are you seeing the level of mixed martial arts, especially in the gyms, rising to maybe meet what casuals would call like the American standard of training?
Sorry, can you repeat that again? I lost the headphones for a second.
No, that's all right. So we were just saying that you've touched on it, that something about your career was you've always stayed in Victoria for your training. And, you've said that you've had people come to you and say, go to America, go to Thailand. That's where the proper training is. As someone who has stayed in Victoria to train throughout their career, have you seen the level in the gyms, specifically with the training, grow over time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had a few guys back in the early days, top caliber, could have easily fought inside the UFC. I mean, the top level hasn't really it has increased, I guess, but it's more the volume and the amount of guys at that level now. We've got a lot of guys in the UFC from Australia. There's probably a lot more that could well and truly compete inside the UFC. Myself and Kit Campbell, who's another young, he's my age, probably the best welterweight in Australia outside the UFC. And we've been high level since we were that age, 18, 19. He could have well and truly fought in the UFC. But now there's just and back in those days it was myself, Kit, and Dan Kelly, and that was our sparring session. That's all we had. Cal Potter come in eventually. Now we'll have a sparring session of 20 guys, and they're all pretty high caliber. And then a good handful of those could compete in the UFC. So definitely, more so than the level is the amount of fighters, and that comes with with the popularity growing, more gyms open up, more opportunities for people to train. So it's just how the sort of the natural progression goes, I guess.
Yeah, Jake, you've been known for your crisp striking and your ability to scrap, which was more evident in your last fight. But you are actually people for sure aware you were a BJJ Black Belt under Carlos Vieira. Can you speak to the value of being able to work with such an accredited BJJ coach, especially in Australia where we don't have as many world champion caliber black belts opening gyms left, right, and center?
Yeah, I did get my black belt under Carlos. I'm now with the Australian Elite team, who's headed by Ninos. But yeah, I mean, having those influences from overseas obviously helps a lot. Pretty much, like the only thing we're missing in terms of that is the wrestling. That's the biggest difference between America. You got America, Russia, but our striking is high level. We see Jack Della, Josh Coolabau, plenty of the other Aussies. We're all, I think a lot of us, Malaki, like that. I guess Australians, we come from that stock where we whether it's playing footy or Aussie rules, we get into some form of boxing, fitness, or whatever, for whatever reason, we seem to fall into the striking game. In saying that, like we've got a lot of high level Brazilian guys coming over, which is attributed and help the level of Australia grow a lot. It'd be good if we could have a similar. We've got a few good wrestling coaches in Australia, but like nowhere near what, let's say, jiu-jitsu has contributed to the growth of the sport. So hopefully one day we can get that. That's pretty much the only thing that's missing. You know what I mean? But we've done well. We've done well to reach the level we have, considering how limited we are and cut off from the rest of the world.
For sure. So something we've seen criticized in today's environment in MMA is fighters such as, Edmund Shabazian coming into the UFC, and the fans say it's too early in their career or they're simply too young. But as someone who was in the UFC, such as yourself, can you speak to maybe some of the positives and negatives of getting to the UFC early in your career when you are that young in the sport?
Yeah, I mean, I felt more than ready. I believe I was more than ready to compete in the UFC. A little bit more maturity would help in a few of those earlier fights. Because the only downfall really over I've had it pretty good. I've had a long, prosperous career. I think the average fight span in the UFC is about 2.5 fights when they work out the average. I had 16 fights, so I've done pretty good. But I mean, the only downfall really is more some fans' perception that you've been in the UFC since you were 19, so you've almost been in the UFC for 9 years, and you haven't won a title. It's like, well, yeah, it's good to get in the UFC when you're young, but the only downfall is we're not established. We're not like Israel Adesanya, who was a world champ kickboxer coming in the UFC. We're not like Yuri Prochazka. He was like a risen light heavyweight world champion. These guys are established and they're ready. They're ready to fight at that top 5 caliber, championship level caliber. Whereas getting in the UFC when you're 19, I was good. Probably mostly to do with my athleticism and just being an angry young teenager. But you have to learn on the job.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're going to make mistakes at that age and you're going to lose fights. You're not going to go your whole career from that age. Especially when you start pushing towards top 15. It's hard. So you definitely, that's the hardest thing I said. Like I mentioned to everyone is that's the reason, I've been in the UFC so long. I haven't won a title, but I've done pretty good considering. But I had to literally learn. At 19, how good can I be? Exactly. I was probably 20% of what I can reach when I reach my peak. Late 20s, early 30s. So you just, it's just, and you got to treat it as a marathon, not a sprint at that age.
Yeah.
Just there's no rush on getting high level opponents. Just take each fight as it comes. You've got a good solid 10 years to learn and progress until you reach your peak.
Yeah.
So that it's not necessarily a downfall. It's a bit catch-22. It's good to get in when you're young. Everyone loves it. 19-year-old in the UFC is pretty crazy, but at the same time, you're not going to be able to compete with the exception of maybe John Jones. At 23, competing with those guys.
Yeah.
Yep.
But most guys, they're not going to be able to do it at that age.
Yeah. 100%. Well, look, Jake, we've spoken to a few fellow Aussies, and John Wayne Parr and Jamie Malaki and Arlene Blancow, and we've all asked them what we can do in Australia to really promote and build the sport of MMA. With potentially the UFC coming back in the first quarter of next year, what do you think can be done, in your opinion, to build the sport maybe to the level of your mainstay Aussie sports like cricket, AFL, and rugby, etc.?
To get it to that level, it's going to be more the backing of, number one, the government.
Yeah.
Having funding for them to put in. Like if you go to Abu Dhabi in the Middle East, jiu-jitsu is insanely big. They've got like 200. They got 200,000 registered members to the their little affiliation there. So they got 200,000 grapplers that are registered to this affiliation, and it's got the backing. They're getting funding left, right, and center to put on these comps. They're opening a big gym for Khabib. You need that sort of backing, whether it's going to be from some sort of big corporation that's got an interest, or they just want to get involved, or it's from the government. You need that. I mean, you can see it's actually, if anything, it's gone downhill in New Zealand because of the way the fighters were treated.
Yeah.
They're bringing in cricket players from overseas, no quarantines, this and that. But then when it comes to us, because we're not bringing in massive amounts of revenue for the country, maybe they'll have a UFC 2-3 times a year. That brings in some revenue, but it's nothing like cricket or AFL. Because we don't bring that in, they just make our life hard. It's hard to get out of the country to go and fight. It's hard to get back in the country to go and fight. So to reach that sort of level, it's not really on us. I mean, we're pretty much doing everything we can. The fighters are. I mean, Aussie fighters are always good role models. We're just Aussies. And so we're doing pretty much everything that we can do, I believe. Where the guys are filming their training camps, they're filming stuff, they're showing the fans what it's like at home. It makes it more relatable. Like we can, everyone sees that we're just human beings. Like I've got 2 kids at home. One of them's 14 weeks old. So when people see that, it just draws people into the sport. Makes you more relatable. They understand that you're not just a fighter who gets locked in a cupboard after your fights. You're actually a normal person. You grew up normal life. I think in that sense that we're doing pretty much all we can. It's just like the backing from higher up, and the brass needs to be a bit more.
Yeah, for sure. So look, Jake, final question from us, and thank you very much for joining us today. With Santiago being somewhat non-committal to a fight with you, and you definitely wanting a top 15 name next, which you have definitely earned the right to have. If not Santiago, we personally would love to see you take on either Neil Magny, who's just coming off a loss to Shavkat Rakhmonov, or even Jeff Neal would be a really fun fight. But who do you want next if you could choose?
I've pretty much cycled off from 15 to 7 to the matchmakers.
Yep.
So that's like I think it was like Santiago down to Stephen Thompson.
Yeah.
And they said definitely they want to, but everyone's the top 15 are either all preoccupied with other matchups or they're injured at the moment. So bit of a waiting game. As you mentioned, Neil Magny's just didn't really come off injured off a fight or anything, so he should I mean, if he wants to or not, he should be good to go relatively soon. So it's definitely something that we'll reach out and see if it's something we can organise. But pretty much anyone in the top 15, ideally, like just back off the momentum of the last fight. I'd like to. I mean, if nothing else in my UFC career, I want to be known as one of the best strikers to fight in the division at least. If nothing else comes from it, I want to be known as that. And just off that one performance, people are already saying that. I've believed that for a long time. We've finally brought our what I do in training into the fight. If I put together another 2-3 of those performances, I could be fighting top 5 guys and title contenders. You know what I mean? So
100%.
yeah, so we're trying to get some good strikers. Pretty much anyone who is believed to be one of the best strikers, that's who I want to go and fight. And then when I get to that, sort of in the top 10 or whatnot, obviously you're at the mercy of the UFC. They want you to fight grapplers and everything. I'm happy to do so, but obviously I like to stand up and fight, and the fans love that too. UFC love that, and that's what I'm chasing.
Yeah, 100%. Well, look, Jake, man, we don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you got a busy afternoon, but I want to say from us, man, that performance you put on was an all-time performance. I was sitting in my lounge room just going off. I was like, that was incredible. So from us as fans as well, as, as people who talk to other fighters and stuff, congrats, man, because that was an awesome performance. We'd love to chat to you again, man, after your next fight, definitely. And we wish you all the best, my brother.
Nah, thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it. I'll come back on anytime.
Awesome.
Thanks very much, man.